The wind over Dustwater Ridge was sharp that evening, carrying the scent of rain and loneliness. Jake Holler, the man they called the Giant Cowboy, rode slow across the plains, his shadow stretching long over the cracked earth. He wasn't a giant in legend, just a man of uncommon size and silence. 6'8", broad as a barn door, and with a stare that could make coyotes scatter. Folks said the land bent to him when he walked. But Jake didn't feel powerful. He felt hollow. 2 years had passed since the fire took his wife and child, leaving behind a ranch too quiet for any living soul. Now he just worked cattle for whoever would pay, never staying long enough to remember what a home felt like. That night, thunder grumbled low over the hills as he guided his horse toward the ghost town of Marystone. He'd heard rumors of an abandoned ranch for sale, cheap, fertile, but haunted. He didn't care about ghosts, he carried worse inside. As he rode into town, the rain began to fall. Lanterns flickered dimly in windows, and the muddy street glistened under the lightning. Jake tied his horse and stepped into the saloon, shaking off the cold. The barkeep gave him a nod but no words. People rarely spoke first to Jake. He ordered whiskey, sat by the window, and stared into the storm. Then he saw her, a small figure running down the muddy street, clutching a ragged doll, hair plastered by rain. She couldn't have been more than 7. She stumbled and fell, and before Jake even thought, he was out the door, scooping her up in his massive arms. "Hey, easy now," he said, his voice deep but gentle. The girl blinked up at him, wide-eyed. You came back," she whispered, shivering. "What?" Jake frowned. "You need a wife," she said suddenly, her voice trembling but sure, "and I need a dad." Jake froze. He looked down at her, this tiny creature, soaked to the bone, clutching him like she'd known him forever. Something inside him cracked open. "Where's your mama?" he asked softly. The girl pointed toward the edge of town, where the lightning flashed over the outline of an old ranch house. "She's waiting," she said. "She told me to find the biggest man in the storm." "That's you." Jake's heart thudded once, hard. Against all sense, he took her hand. Together, they walked toward the house through the rain. The ranch stood on a rise, its windows glowing faintly in the dark. Jake could swear it hadn't been there when he rode in. The girl tugged his hand gently. "Mama doesn't talk much," she said. "She's been sad, like you." Her words hit deep. Inside, the house smelled of pine and smoke. By the hearth stood a woman, tall, slender, her hair long and dark, eyes like the storm outside. She turned as they entered, her face both beautiful and broken. Jake felt his breath catch. "You found him," she said to the girl, her voice soft as rain. "Mama, he's the one," the little girl said proudly. "He's the Giant Cowboy." The woman smiled faintly but there was sorrow in it. "You shouldn't have come," she said quietly to Jake. "This place isn't kind to lonely men." He studied her face, the pain, the strength. "I've seen worse," he muttered. She motioned for him to sit. The girl curled up by the fire, humming a tune that sounded old and haunting. "What's her name?" Jake asked. The woman hesitated. "Clara," she said finally. "And you?" Jake Holler. For a while, the storm was the only sound between them. Then she spoke again. "This ranch was my husband's. He died 2 winters ago. Since then, it's been dying too. The animals vanished. The crops turned to dust." Her voice trembled slightly. "Clara believes, if someone strong stays here, if someone believes in the land again, it'll live. She says the earth listens to hearts like yours." Jake shifted uneasily. "I'm no savior, ma'am, just a man who's lost too much." The woman looked into the fire. "Maybe that's exactly what this place needs." Clara stirred and looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Will you stay, mister?" Jake wanted to refuse. He didn't belong anywhere. But when the little girl reached out her hand again, he couldn't say no. Something in her eyes, hope, trust, the kind that burns in darkness, made his chest ache. "I'll stay for a bit," he said. The woman's lips curved into a smile. "Then you've already done more than you know." Days turned into weeks. Jake fixed fences, cleared brush, and brought life back to the ranch little by little. The girl followed him everywhere, laughing, asking endless questions, sometimes riding his shoulders like a bird. "You really are a giant," she'd giggle, and he'd grin despite himself. The woman, Clara's mother, worked beside him, quiet but steady. Sometimes he'd catch her watching him, eyes filled with gratitude and something deeper. The silence between them wasn't empty, it was healing. One night, as the sun bled into the horizon, Jake sat on the porch sharpening his knife. The girl came out with a blanket and wrapped it around his shoulders. "You look sad," she said. "I miss my family," he admitted. "But when I'm here, it doesn't hurt as bad." She smiled. "Mama says people who carry pain make the land stronger. That's why it called you." He looked down at her, confused. "Called me," she nodded. "The storm wasn't just rain. It was the land crying for help. It sent me to find you." Inside, the woman stood by the firelight, watching them. The air shimmered faintly around her, like heat rising from desert sand. For the first time, Jake noticed she didn't cast a shadow. "Clara's mama," he whispered, realization dawning. The little girl leaned closer. "She's part of the land now. But she can't stay without someone like you." Jake's heart pounded. He rose and stepped toward the door. "If I stay," he said quietly, "what happens to me?" The woman smiled, soft and sad. "You become what you've always been, Jake. A guardian, a father, a home." That night, when the storm rolled back across the hills, lightning lit the ranch like daylight. The next morning, travelers passing by swore they saw a giant man standing in the fields, holding a little girl's hand, with a woman of light beside them. The land around them glowed with new green, the air alive with birdsong. The ranch was alive again, and the legend of the giant cowboy and the little girl who saved the valley spread far and wide, the story of how grief, love, and destiny built a home in the heart of a storm. The rain stopped the moment Jake and the girl reached the ranch house. The world turned strangely quiet, the only sound their breathing and the creak of the porch beneath his boots. The door was already ajar, warm light spilling from within. Jake hesitated. Something about the place felt alive, as if the walls themselves were listening. The little girl tugged gently at his sleeve. "Mama's waiting," she whispered. Her voice carried that innocent certainty that made it impossible to doubt. Jake took a slow breath and stepped inside. The interior was old but spotless. The fire in the hearth burned bright, filling the room with a soft golden glow. There were pictures on the walls, faded portraits of cowhands, a woman holding a baby, endless fields behind them. A scent of wildflowers lingered faintly in the air, even though none could bloom in that season. Then she appeared, tall, graceful, her long black hair falling over her shoulders, her eyes deep as dusk. For a moment, Jake forgot how to breathe. She wasn't young, not exactly, but her face carried that ageless beauty that came with pain and endurance. "You found him," she said quietly, her gaze on the little girl. "You really found him." Jake felt out of place, massive and awkward in that warm, delicate space. He cleared his throat. "Ma'am, I just saw the kid out in the storm. Didn't seem right to leave her alone." The woman smiled faintly. "She doesn't belong to the storm," she said, "she belongs to this land, as do I." The girl ran to her mother and hugged her tightly. "I told you he'd come," she said. The woman knelt, kissed the child's hair, then looked up at Jake. "You shouldn't have come here, cowboy. Men who come to this place either leave too soon, or never leave at all." Her words sent a chill through him, though her tone wasn't threatening, more like a warning whispered by someone who'd lived through too much. "I don't scare easy," Jake said quietly. "But I'd sure like to understand what's going on here." She nodded toward the table. "Then sit." The chair creaked under his weight as he lowered himself. The fire crackled, casting shifting shadows across her face. "This ranch was once alive," she began. "My husband and I kept it. It fed us, sheltered us, loved us. But when he died, something inside the land broke. The animals ran, the crops turned to dust. It's been fading ever since." Jake's gaze drifted to the girl. She was tracing circles in the soot by the fireplace, humming a tune that made the air feel strange, ancient, almost sacred. "She believes," the woman said softly, "that the land can still be healed. That if a man strong enough, kind enough, stays here, it might breathe again." Jake frowned. "I'm no healer, ma'am. Just a ranch hand who's lost too much to fix anything." Her eyes softened. "And yet, you came when the storm called. Do you think that's a coincidence?" Jake stared into the fire. He'd heard stories all his life about cursed lands and haunted places, but this felt different. The house didn't feel evil, it felt lonely, like it had been waiting too long. The silence stretched, filled only by the wind brushing against the shutters. Finally, the woman stood and walked closer. "Clara," she said softly, "fetch our guest a blanket." The girl nodded and skipped off, leaving them alone by the firelight. "Jake Holler," she said, as if tasting the name. "You wear your grief like armor." He looked up sharply, but her expression was gentle, almost sorrowful. "The earth knows hearts like yours. It remembers pain. It needs it. Before he could answer, the ground trembled faintly, a shiver through the floorboards. The fire dimmed, and a low hum filled the air. What was that? He asked, half rising. She held up a hand. It's just the land. It feels your presence now. Then she smiled, faint and weary. You don't need to believe me yet. You'll see. Clara returned and wrapped the thick wool blanket around his shoulders. You'll stay, right? She asked, her big eyes glowing with hope. Jake hesitated. For tonight, he said softly. The woman's smile deepened, almost sad. That's how it begins, she whispered. Outside, the storm rolled again across the plains, but it no longer sounded angry. It sounded like something waking up, something vast, and patient, and old. Jake didn't understand it yet, but as he sat in that warm light, watching the woman and her child, a strange feeling stirred in his chest, not fear, not sorrow, but the faint, forgotten warmth of belonging. And though he didn't know it yet, the land itself had already chosen him.